Well, looks like we're up and running. That's good to know. Uh, I don't know how good the connection will be, but we'll just make do with what we have if that's all right with everybody. Hello, as you come in, I'm Roy Potter, of course. And right up front, so for those of you who are concerned about this, if you don't want to talk about biblical spiritual stuff, I suggest that you go ahead and check out now. However, what I'm going to show you is going to be something different than you've ever heard before, most likely. Okay? And it certainly has to do with what's going on in the world today, both by governments against their people. You all should know what I'm talking about. 4.5 by 5, 6 by 5. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's going to be Hebrew, but it's important to know why. It's important to know why because there's so much misinformation about what the scriptures say. And I've talked about that for a long time now. Am I a Bible thumping nut? No. I take a lot of things into consideration when I do my studies. As I put out many, many times, I do not consider the Bible the complete and infallible Word of God. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I've talked about it in the past, but that's not what we're really here for tonight. Because of the war in Europe, because of the attacks on the peoples of the world by their own governments, with the treatments that are maiming and killing, and you know how I've called out Trump, there's some things that you need to know, and this is one of them. I'm going to talk about two things tonight. This will be the first one. The second will be, as I've addressed many times in the past, why the world is going the way it is on all of this misidentification of sex, of gender, uh, people trying to be something other than what they are. The NWO and those groups, WEF for instance, pushing this entire thing about kids have to change their sex, all of that. All right. So I'm not going to talk about Ecclesiastes today. Okay, we're going to be specific because this is a really important one. All right. So we're going to cover those two things. I said no killing for the, not necessarily the more important of the two, but because misunderstanding of what that really means. And that's why we're here. So, what brought this up? Well, I was on Twitter today and I saw a Twitter follower, hi Roosevelt, a Twitter follower come on and say, Roy, could you comment on this? And when I looked at the thread, what happened was is Jack Posobiec said that the scholars are basically stating that the commandment "do not kill," "thou shalt not kill," it's actually no kill is what it means right there. No kill. It says lo, which means no. Um, that they all agree, or most of them agree, that it's talking about assassination or murder. And while that's not entirely incorrect, it's certainly not entirely true. And so I pondered it a little bit today. I normally don't do these on Monday, but because of some circumstances and also for the situation that we have here, I thought that I'd go ahead and address it so you can see something that's extremely important and it impacts everything. It impacts everything. Okay, so let's talk about it. One of the commandments is thou shalt not kill, and literally it says no kill. Okay, but what kind of kill? As you probably know if you followed me for years now, I've shown you that the Hebrew words are quite a bit different than English. When we talk about killing in English, you can say kill, you can say murder. There are a few, but in Hebrew they have a more exact meaning depending upon the letters that are used to describe the act or what's happening. And that happens here. And it's very important. Very, very important. So I'm going to concentrate. If you want to, you can open up your Bibles to Exodus 20:13 and Deuteronomy 5:17. And basically that's the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Now the word that is used there is only used in about 6 other places in the Old Testament. Only about 6 places. And the word is this one here, Resh Zadeh Chet. I'm not going to go into gematria of that. That's not really important now. How you pronounce it is basically Rotzak. Rotzak, and it's word 7523 in Strong's if you want to look that up. For comparison, let's look at the situation in Genesis 4:8, where it talks about Cain slaying Abel or killing Abel. That word is harag, and it's He Resh Gimel. Why do I bring that up? Because as I just said, this word is only used about 6-7 times in the entire Old Testament. Why? The commandment, thou shalt not kill, had a very specific meaning. Can you kill in self-defense? Would that be a violation of thou shalt not kill? What happens if you're in a car accident and you kill somebody? How does this affect you? What happens? So this is the trick. Remember, I've said that the letters that are used in the Hebrew language give it a special meaning, even if there are about, I'd say, probably eight words in Hebrew that can be translated to kill. Okay, about 8 of them. Why was this one used for the commandment, thou shalt not kill? And a couple of other places, which aren't really important right now. I'll mention one of them here in a minute. But why this one? And what is it telling you? What is it saying? Well, let's go back and look at this one where you know that Cain slew Abel, killed Abel out of jealousy. He wanted to get gain, right? It was envy. It was anger. It was premeditated. Do you notice something about this? Basically, if you break this down in the Hebrew letters, it basically means this is a window. He is a window or a way out. Resh means the head, the seat of consciousness, especially this area of the brain. And Gimel has an interesting tone. It means travel. It means you take something from one place to another. So what you're doing when Cain kills Abel is he's taking his consciousness and moving it through a window to another place, destroying his physical body, and his consciousness has to go travel somewhere else. His soul, if you want. That's not really the case, his spirit. As I've often said, the body and the spirit are the soul of man. So we are living souls. And when you separate the spirit from the body, when you separate the spirit from the soul, the body and the spirit, when you separate that spirit from the body, then of course it's death. And that's what this is saying. It's traveling through a window to another place. The consciousness is, okay? Or the spirit. Now, in this, it's kind of a general term. And certainly Abel was innocent of what happened to him. But they decided to use this word because they were describing what Cain was about. Now let's go look at this word. This is again the word that's used in the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And in another few places, which you can look up if you want, it's word 7523. You can go into Strong's, you can see the other places it's listed, okay? And there's something very important about this word. Because Moses killed a lot of people. And God told him to do it, right? That's the argument. Well, it was okay because God told him to do it. Well, there's another thing going on here. I can't go into the entire history of the Canaanites and all those different ites that were over there, and I don't want to call them pagans. They were far worse than that in most cases. They were killing their children. They were altering their sex. They were offering their children to their god, burning them in the fire, Moloch, etc., etc. The children didn't have a chance to grow up in a righteous environment. There were some really bad things going on, not to mention what they were doing to the women and the men to themselves, okay? So I'm not going to pass judgment on all of that. But what I do want to go to is this right here. Again, this word is rotzak, resh, zade, chet. Basically, what it means, and this is very important because the aspect of killing has a particular problem with it. And it is if you're doing it to this type of individual. Azade, right there, is the key to this word. Sade. The meaning of sade is bowed down, humble, righteous, innocent. Did you hear that last word? Innocent. Now there's another Hebrew word, whole word, that means innocent, and surprisingly, zade isn't in there. But in this word right here, it was chosen because what it's telling you is that if you take the life of a righteous man, a righteous woman, or someone who's innocent, no matter how it happens, you have violated a commandment. There's no intent here. Okay? And that's why when you read other scriptures, it talks about and this particular word is used to describe the killing. In one place it says if a man kills another unknowingly or not with intent, there are cities of refuge where those people that cause the death can go so that they don't get killed, because it's an eye for an eye. It's blood for blood. It's life for life. And even Jesus said those who kill with the sword, meaning the innocent, the humble, the righteous, will die by the sword, and there is no forgiveness for them. And I know Christians will argue with this, but if you kill an innocent or a righteous, the blood of Christ doesn't cover you, basically, is what the story is. Now, people will disagree with that, but all I got to do is point out what Jesus said. If you kill with the sword, you'll die with the sword. Okay, his atonement, if you want to say, doesn't cover for that. Thank you for throwing CAES off of here, whoever did that, probably Roosevelt. I'm not sure. Oh, Liza Jean did. Thanks, Liza Jean. And hello, I didn't know you were here. So I hope I'm making myself clear. And again, Christians will say, "Oh, that's not true. You know, if you repent from murder, you're saved." Well, that's arguable when you look at this and when you look at all the other words about killing. Okay, so what that means is that you'll have to pay with your own blood, one way or another. Then there's a pardon, is what they call it, a pardon. Again, I know this is going to make a lot of people upset, but then there's a pardon for you having paid that price. But Christ doesn't cover that one for you. Another example. And people say, well, that was before Jesus. Well, it doesn't matter. The principle's the same. David wanted Uriah, the captain of his army, he wanted Uriah's wife Bathsheba. And so he came up with a little scheme. It's almost this type of a thing here, right? He came up with a scheme to get. Okay? And he put Uriah in front of the army so that he knew he'd get killed, and then he could hide the fact that Bathsheba, he had taken her, right? Where in actuality, if David had gone to Uriah and said, you know, I'd really like to have your wife, no matter how you feel about it, we're talking about a culture, 3,000 years ago, all right? David could have gone to Uriah and said, you know, I'd really like to have Bathsheba. And Uriah would have said, my king, here, she's yours. And there would be nothing wrong with that, despite what Christians might think. But that's not what David did. David tried to hide it, tried to hide his theft, his envy, his jealousy, and his act of murder. So what happened? Well, David took Bathsheba, right? Nathan said, though, that he was the man that committed the crime in the story, and I've told you about that before. Nathan the prophet came to David and said, what about this man that did this horrible thing and stole this person's property, etc.? So David said, let's bring him here and we'll try him and get rid of him right now. And then Nathan said, you're the man, right? And then David said, oh no, I've done terrible here. So David and Bathsheba have a baby. What happened to the baby? Does anybody know? Does anybody know what happened to the baby of David and Bathsheba? What happened to the baby? If that were the case, Annie, I'm just going to throw in here. Yeah, they lost the baby. Annie 0100 is saying that Bathsheba was a Hittite, a daughter of Cain. No, that's not true. If that were the case, then the lineage of Jesus could not have come through that line. So that's not true. Sorry, it isn't true. I don't know where you got that, but that's not true. Just because they lived in a Hittite land doesn't mean they're Hittite. Just like you can live in America and you can still be, English. So even though it might call them by the name, they're going by nationality, not by race. But there's no way that Jesus came from that line. Okay. All right. I mean, he did come from that line, so she's not in that area. Okay. So what we have here is the baby died. In other words, the price for killing in that manner an innocent life is that you forfeit yours. Or the sin of the father is visited upon up to the second and third generation. So God took that firstborn son, I think it was a son, took that firstborn son in payment for that. And then, of course, Bathsheba had Solomon later, who then did his thing. And he had some problems too. But the point is that the price had to be paid. And David said about that that God's not going to leave his soul in hell, right? He has to pay for it too, but a life had to be traded for life. So that's why they had cities of refuge. So if you, today, let's say we were living under that law, which in actuality we are, even if you don't understand that because you think things changed, they really didn't. But anyway, if you kill somebody in a car accident, you're liable. And in those ancient times, the family of the deceased has a right to kill you. So they would hunt you down to make you pay for the life that you took. And that's why God set up those cities of refuge where those people would be safe until things were forgotten or they could move on with their lives. Because God understands that accidents happen, but justice can't be robbed by mercy. So, the real point of the commandment, thou shalt not kill, is not that you can't kill in self-defense, etc., but that if you take the life of innocence, of righteousness, that's the real point. Someone who's holy, bowed down in humility. In other words, innocence, righteousness. As a matter of fact, you all know the word, at least you should have if you've been following me all this time, Zadok, the priest. Nathan the priest and Zadok the prophet. Well, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet. Zadok means righteous one. Zedek is the other form of it, and that's part of the word for Melchizedek, a righteous king, right? Malchi meaning king, Zedek meaning righteous, so it's righteous king. So that's why this is different than all of the other discussions of killing. If you kill an innocent, whether intentionally or not, you have to pay for it. Now, some people say, well, Jesus did that by dying on the cross, so he's the vicarious sacrifice. I'm not going to argue that point today. My point is, thou shalt not kill. The commandment is specifically talking about killing the innocent, righteous ones, those who are bowed down. And this has male and female aspects. The male is a righteous man, okay? Righteous man. The female side means that she has humility. She's devoted. Even if she's done some horrible things. As a matter of fact, if you like Paul, and I know a lot of you do, he said that women are saved in childbearing. Why is that? No matter what they've done. Why is that? Because when they bear a child, they're shedding their blood. Life for life. And God said he would save them in childbearing. And that goes back to what happened in the Garden of Eden and a bunch of other things, which I'm not going to get into tonight. I mean, we could get into a long discussion about all of that. But there are stories in the Bible about women who, especially in Hosea, for instance, about a woman who goes off and plays the whore, etc., etc., and but then comes back, and because of her devotion and humility, her husband can wash her, clean her up, accept her repentance, and she becomes one of these. The situation with Jesus and the church, Zion, or the Holy Bride of Christ, is the same sort of thing. That's the same type of thing that's going on. Washing the sins away and bringing them to you, but the price is still paid. So that's what this is about. So the argument about it having to be murder or assassination, it wouldn't matter in this case. The key controlling factor in this type of thou shalt not kill is if the person is a righteous person, innocent, humble, those types of things. So what happens in war? You're flying along and you're doing this for God and country, right? And there's a building down there full of innocent people, and you bomb it. You've just violated that commandment, and you're going to pay. If somebody comes up to you and wants to fight you, and they draw a weapon, it's not even really this one, but this describes it more than this does. Because you're not killing an innocent person. You're not dispatching. What this means is a righteous head, a righteous man, somebody who has righteousness. Remember, you have God's law written in your mind and in your heart, right? This is the cerebrum, the front of the brain. So the righteous person has these understandings in their cerebral cortex, all right? But what happens when you kill them, this is a hate. It means a barrier. In other words, you just cut off their consciousness and their life in this world. You've cut it off. You've barred it. You've shut it down. You've put a gate up where they can't go any further. You're going to pay for that. That's why war is so evil. And they get us into this thing, or any number of things. What's happened with, and I can't mention the exact names here right now because this is an important video. The things that have happened with the extant disease that's been going on and how it came about, and then the binary weapon system that was used to maim and kill. You should all be reading between the lines. They're violating this right here. They're not doing this, which is bad enough. They're doing this, which is expressly prohibited. Do you understand? It's expressly prohibited. It's not just any killing or any murder that's expressly prohibited. It's killing the innocent, the righteous, the humbled, the devoted to God, of course, or whatever. You see the difference? Does that make sense to everybody? Do you understand what I'm saying here? Okay. CAS, throw him off of here, throw them off of here. This isn't Mormon. This is the basic Hebrew, CA. How did you get back on here? You were thrown off once. You can bar him. He's the one that's there, so I don't know how far back you have to go, but he says, the Mormon politically correct pacifist. I've already talked about pacifism, and that's not what turn the other cheek or be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves means, that you have to be pacifist. So you're out of here, Case, CAES. Any of my mods are free to totally and forever ban you from this channel. Okay? You're done. You're nothing but a troll with a chip on your shoulder. Give him the hate. Very good, Walter. Very good. Yeah, block him. That's exactly what hate means. Block him. Yeah, block him, everybody. That's good. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to cover. So that whole argument, or that whole dissertation by Posobiec saying that, all the scholars agree that thou shalt not kill means assassinate or murder. No, it's very specific. It means the innocent, the righteous. Okay, that's what it really means. Okay, let's see. How does that bear on abortion? Well, the argument goes that, well, the baby hasn't taken its first breath, so it's not a living soul, so it's not human. That's the argument, okay, that it's attached to the mother. That's the argument. And what I will say is this, that there's a specific, and I can't remember the exact um, quote, but I believe it's in Leviticus. And it does say that if there's any sign of mischief that causes the baby to be lost, that whoever caused that will pay the penalty. Because the baby is alive because of the mother's breath. Okay? It's still there. And it's innocent. It's a totally innocent life. So, it falls under this category. All right? You're going to pay one way or another. Christians will say Jesus did it vicariously, like I just said a few minutes ago, talked about. Uh, I don't think that's the case, but if you want to believe that, that's fine. But Jesus is the one that said, "He who kills with the sword shall die by the sword." All right? Especially if it involves an innocent person. All right, that's how I would let. Talmud says the baby must take a breath. I know. That's why I brought that up, Rachel. Yeah, the Talmud does that, but the Talmud has a lot of things that are very bad in it. Okay, that's the reason why. Thank you, Roosevelt. I appreciate throwing him off of there. I'm sorry that keeps happening. I don't know why he. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the argument about all of that with Jesus and all that today. That's not my issue. You settle that in your own conscience. If you think Jesus, if you can go out and kill somebody today for some reason, especially if that person is innocent, if you just go out and murder an innocent person and never did anything to you and has treated his neighbors good and basically a righteous person, you're going to have a long discussion with Jesus saying, "Aren't you going to cover this? Aren't you going to cover this?" No, you're going to pay for it. You won't be forgiven. You can be pardoned. That's the Talmud. The Talmud did a lot of things so that they could justify doing things. The Jews could, those Talmudic uh, Jews, those Talmudic folks, so they could justify going after the beasts of the field. And I've talked about that before. If you're not Jewish, and even if you are in some cases, we're seeing that now in Israel. You are a beast of the field. You're not human. So that's how they justify it in the Talmud, that you're a beast of the field. You're not just goyim. You're a beast. You're an animal. You have no soul, and killing you has absolutely no payment to be made because you're nothing. Yeah, you're cattle. That's right, Rachel. That's right. Uh, but their own commandments say otherwise. But they get around that by saying those things. That goes for a lot of different crimes. Rape, torture. You could even say child love, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, you don't, Walter. That's the whole problem with war. Part of the thing is when the other side picks up weapons and is fighting against you, then they're not entirely innocent, are they? They've chosen to be involved in a battle of sword against sword. Okay, but if you go and you kill, like I'll tell you a good example. Okay, the bombing of Dresden in World War II, or in our case, the bombing of Serbia during the Balkans War in the 90s. How many innocent people did we murder there? And they were innocent. And you were commanded not to do that. Accidents happen. But if accidents happen, why do we need cities of refuge in the Old Testament? So that you don't get the blood payment, the blood atonement made upon you if you accidentally kill somebody. So it's very evil. So these evil people that control the world suck us into doing these horrible, horrible things. And we think we're going to be forgiven of them. No, you got to pay that price. I'll let you argue with Jesus about whether what he's done is sufficient enough to pay that price or not. Okay, that's between you and him. I'm not passing judgment on you. I'm telling you what the Hebrew says in the original. Drop my pointer. Okay, you understand completely? Duty calls. Oh, okay. All right, let's change subject matter just a little bit. It's still going to be scriptural, and I'm not going to use the board here. We're just going to talk heart to heart. I've talked a lot about the problem with males and females, right? And if you don't know, you should know now that the one of the objectives is to destroy the male and female relationship. And I've talked about that. Yeah, Hallrag, very good. Yeah, there's Zalbach too. Like I said, there are other ones, but this one is the only one out of, look them up. You will not find another word about killing that has the Zadeh in it. You won't. And that's why knowing what the Hebrew letters are that make up the word make it so important to understand what's really going on. And I've talked about that before. It's called Notaricon. All right. Okay. Okay. Male female thing. I wanted to get on that real quick tonight, just in passing, because if you followed me for a long time, you know that I've had a problem with the Christian uh, viewpoint on some things that are attributed to Jesus, and I've explained when he said that those he was talking about, and I've said this before, but I have a special reason for bringing it up this time. That if a man and woman are together and the man dies and she marries another man who marries another man who marries another man, and they were all brothers in the story. It was actually a Pharisee Sadducee attack on the Maccabees and their heroics, which Jesus didn't appreciate. But it also comes, and that's why he answered the way he did. But it also comes down to a misunderstanding of Leviticus, where it says if a man dies and he dies childless, it's called the Levitical law, that he can marry his dead brother's wife and raise up children to his dead brother. Uh, but it's still the wife of the dead brother. And that's the point of what Jesus said. What was that? Please explain, though, what about innocents who are killed in a righteous war? Same thing. It doesn't give any exceptions. That's why war is so dangerous. If you have a righteous war, that's why you hear all this talk about Roosevelt about trying to limit collateral damage. No, it's not justified. Our bombing Hiroshima was not justified. It makes war pretty tough, but that's the reason why. That's the reason why. Killing of innocents is unforgivable. It's a mortal sin. It's unforgivable. It's pardonable, but it's not forgivable. Okay. Going back to this situation where Jesus says, "Therefore, you do not understand the Scripture, nor the power of God. For in that world, those worthy of that resurrection of the dead and the world to come neither marry nor are given in marriage." He's talking to the people that didn't believe in the resurrection in the first place and didn't believe basically in an afterlife period. But there was another aspect of that, and it was that he was referring to that Levitical law where the man and the woman will be reinstated the way they were. Okay? Uh, the other guys are just going to have to go fend for themselves, find their soulmates, because you remember, it's God created man, male, and female, so they're created pairs, and it's not just egos. It's not just you have a feminine nature and a male nature. I mean that exists too, anima and animus and all of that that Freud and the other guy talked about. I can't remember his name right now, but it's more than that. It was actually two. And I'm not going to get into that a whole lot today, other than to say that you can tell what the truth is by looking at what the evil is attacking. And since day one in the Garden of Eden, the devil, for lack of a better term, and you've heard me say this before, has been attacking the male female relationship. That's what it's about. I saw a thing the other day where there was a discussion on that very scripture I just talked about, where they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels in heaven. Well, there are two problems with looking at that just from the standpoint that the sexes end. And that is, first of all, what are the angels like? They're different types of angels, right? We saw that when you have some of those angels come down and have sex with women. People say, well, they changed themselves. Well, whatever. They were still able to do it, right? And the other thing is that Jesus said, I would that you would have life and that more abundantly, not less. And you've heard me say this before, more, not less. And there's some other hidden blessings in that, which I won't go into here because it's one of those things that just gets a little too involved. But we weren't created to be androgynous. And the fact that the devils want to make us that way should tell you that that's not what our end state is going to be. They say they want to make what is above the same as below, right? That's how they do it, right? As above, so below. Because they're talking about themselves. They're talking about the evil ones who don't have mates, who don't marry and are given in marriage, but steal the daughters of men, the daughters of the sons of God. So they want to force you to accept their curse of being alone, of being cold, of being in darkness. So they're trying to make our world the gift that we've been given by God on this earth to be men and women and to have the companionship first and all of that entails, and the fruit of that, which is the secondary blessing, the children. They're trying to take it so that they control it, destroy it, and make it like what they are. So Christians haven't helped their position by looking at men and women and sex in general as like the original sin or as dirty or whatever. God didn't say that. God said, who told you that you were naked? I made you perfectly. You are what you are, men and women. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And you're in the image of God, male and female, literally. So we're in a state of confusion right now. This thing is, if you can read between the lines, this gender question that's going across the world and is being embraced by so many cultures, it is evil. And it's here so strongly because even in the Christian realm of things, we've been taught incorrectly, just like with this. And you can see a lot of that in my playlists, in my religion playlist in particular, but also in the Eisenman series, you can see that there as well. Most of you, here we go with this. Most of you know my background, and I'm not going to sit here and try to justify it or explain it. That's not the issue right now. The issue is that at the time that it happened, let me grab something here real quick. It's out of print, but hold on just a minute if I can get around here. This is a tight spot that I'm doing this in. Hold on just a second. You all know that I wrote the book The Crimson Thread, which is about the first century situation with Jesus and what was really going on there. I've written 2 other books too, and you know about this one, right? Most of you follow me know about that one. But I wrote one before this one, and it's this one here. It's no longer in print either. Actually, none of my books are in print anymore. But this was my first book, An Offender for a Word. And after things were done to me because I tried to do marriage the biblical way, which many of you won't agree with, but that's immaterial. It was my good faith religious belief, even if it wasn't yours, and I can back it up. The fact of the matter is, when I wrote this was in 19, let me see what year it was. Yeah, 1986. I wrote this book in 1986. It was after the Supreme Court rejected my appeal to them. Long story. You won't find this. I guess you could find it on the internet. It's probably not going to be cheap. I think at the time it sold for $5. I don't remember, but whatever. I said in this, and I even quoted some things that were happening in the. Let me see if I can find one in the media at the time. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah. Let me show you one of these. This one, might not be quite what I'm looking for, but you see that? And there are more of them in here. This was out of the Deseret News on January 4th and 5th, 1984. Let's see if I can find another one. Yeah. Here's a couple more that I showed. You see that one there? Key West elects, I won't say it, but you can see it. And the top is Capitol Hill scandal sparks unrest. There was a bunch of young boys that were being traded around in the halls of Congress. Anyway, I point all of this out that they were calling out marriage, a form of it that they didn't like, because what happens? They're trying to depopulate the earth. They don't want the man-woman relationship because it brings love, devotion. At least it's supposed to. You work on it to make it do that. But my point in the book was that because they rejected the marriage arrangements that God had said were okay and were his blueprint, what he wanted for his children, because they rejected that and embraced those things, that it would get worse and worse until it became as we see it today. That regular marriage between men and women are looked upon as something ugly and dirty, nasty, and even prejudicial, not woke, and that the androgyny of a certain group of heavenly beings who then fell would be pushed and accepted and embraced and promulgated to the destruction of the rest of the world, just like Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. I'm not trying to excuse myself. I'm not trying to make a statement that, I'd ever go back and do that particular thing again. But your relationship between men and women must be protected at all costs. Do not succumb to this nonsense. And that's one of the things that Putin has been saying that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, he might be saying a lot of things. There's that scripture that says there are many in those days who will say, I am Christ. Right? Will say that Jesus is the Christ, but will deceive many. Well, Putin could be one of those. He might not be sincere. He might be playing a game. I don't know. But at least he's talking the right things, which we don't even get in the United States. It's all pushed to be the other way. At least Putin's talking about, families and men and women and that kind of children, that kind of thing. I know they have a high abortion rate. I understand that. But the point is, what I was saying was that he at least is saying the right things, where in this country, we don't even get that anymore. Or in UK, or in New Zealand, or in Australia, or in Canada. So my prediction in 86, and again, when I wrote the other book, I included some of my first book, Unoffended for a Word, I included some of that and explanations in here. And I said, it's going to destroy America. They're going to embrace the very same things that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, while they sanction and punish and persecute those who believe in the man-woman relationship. And that's exactly what's happening. We have to separate from them. Come out of Babylon that we not partake of her plagues. That means all of them. How you do that? It's a process, and I don't know how much more time we have, frankly. Okay. As far as Putin goes, I might as well talk about that for a minute. First of all, let me back up. Do not forget that your governments are warring upon you, okay? Nobody's standing up for you. We're having a little lull here, but it's not going away. I think enough of you know that. I think you know they're trying to change your basic human makeup. Again, read between the lines. They're trying to maim and kill as many of us as they can, okay? Talking between the lines. This isn't over with yet, and almost everyone in government and a lot of the corporations are guilty of this. Remember that. The second thing is, what's going on in Ukraine. And again, I've got to be careful about what I say here. Uh, I think that there's a dual problem here with this entire thing. I don't trust Putin. Don't think that I do. As I just said a few minutes ago, there are those who will say that I'm Christ, but will deceive many. Right? That could very well be going on. His preaching, basically of the bringing families back and the men and women relationship and all that sound real good. But what's he really up to? I'm not sure. Do I think he's the AC? No, he doesn't qualify, and I've explained why before. Neither does Obama, frankly. Obama could be something else. For all I know, he could be Lucifer incarnated, but I don't think so. His beginnings didn't put him in that category. But at any rate, uh, I'm a little concerned, as I've said on Twitter, and I think I mentioned it here in a video a little bit ago, that it makes no sense that Russia has lost now 5 generals in less than 4 weeks. That's crazy, and other top senior officers. There's something going on there, as I said before. Either there are traitors inside the Russian military and defense apparatus that are telling the enemy where these generals are, right? Or and that would be kind of indicative with the arrest of the FSB. That's their CIA, the director of the FSB and the assistant director, the deputy director. That's possible, or it could be that Putin's having these people taken out to strengthen his own position and or to weaken the Russian defense establishment. Similarly to the way that Biden and our bureaucrats and our officials are weakening our defense posture in all sorts of ways. I'm really not sure. All I know is that Russia could be, as I've explained, the Assyrian out of the Bible who's going to, take care of the wicked on this side. That doesn't make the Assyrian good. They're wicked too. So what does that say? Like the Bible says, like the Scripture says, the wicked will destroy the wicked. It's our duty to stay out of the way and not partake in the destruction of innocence, the righteous, the humble. Okay? We need to stay out of that as much as possible. Self defense is okay. Don't accidentally kill somebody that is innocent. Okay? Again, that's between you and Jesus. I'm not telling you that you can't be. I'm just saying that, wow, he who kills with the sword shall be killed with the sword. Alrighty. I think that's all I really wanted to cover tonight. Like I said, it was kind of a last minute thing. Look these words up. Again, 7523 in Strong's. You'll see that out of all the words there, you can look up kill, killed, killeth, all those. You'll see all the words in Hebrew listed by their numbers. And you'll notice that this one, which is in the commandment, is the only one that refers to innocence or righteousness. So you're not supposed to do anything to injure the righteous or the innocent. That's the real meaning of that commandment. Okay, we got any other things I need to address? Any questions? Um, BP Earthwatch is here. Hi, Jesse. Yeah, the situation is part of the Great Reset. Yeah, it could be. There are people that are saying that Putin walked into a trap. My problem is that I know the capabilities of the Russian army, and they've done a good job. I'm not saying they haven't. They've surrounded the enemy. The enemy is in pockets of where they could be wiped out tomorrow, and these might be using that as a negotiation tool. But the problem is, as you can see, the Western countries are now saying that Russia's weak. They're pushing for war. So Putin needs to nip this in the bud. Now I don't, he's not going to listen to me, you know, uh, but he needs to nip it in the bud. And all those fighters aren't innocent. Okay, they're not innocent. They're not protecting anything that's righteous. That'll probably get me thrown off YouTube saying that. Okay, those who have studied it know what Ukraine's about and what's happened there. Okay, so the situation is part of that. I thought AC would be a Muhammad. There's been an argument to that. There has been an argument to that. The Mahdi, the hidden Imam, and all of that, and in Pet Goat 1 or 2, it made a reference to that. And I'm not saying it's not true, in which case, Obama might be back in the running. But the way I look at it is that this AC has to be recognized by Israel as their Messiah. And the only public leader, the only political leader in the whole world that has achieved that type of status has been Trump. Plus all the other things that Trump has done. I saw, and I think he's right. The Beast Revealed. He and I have some differences, of course. You always do on these things, and it's not a reason to use name calling or lose respect for somebody. I have a lot of respect for the Beast Revealed. Beast System Revealed, I think, is what he goes by on Twitter and maybe on YouTube. But he brought out that the first horse, the white horse with the man on it with a crown on his head and a bow, is the Antichrist because he pretends to be a white knight, but he's not holding a sword. He's holding an arrow, which is exactly the piercing that you have with the current situation. The crown, going along with the disease by the same name, and then the bow and arrow, which is Apollo's injection of, for lack of a better term, I'll say poison or pharmakia. That was Trump. Nobody else fits the bill. Nobody. You could say, well, maybe Gates, maybe, others, but they're not political leaders, at least not in the sense that they've been recognized by that nation in the Middle East. Okay. So Trump fits the bill. He's punched almost all the tickets, and he's coming back, I think. Maybe the generals got poisoned. I don't know. It sounded like they were taken out by snipers, but even if that were the case, I know how generals are protected. For them to know where they are, um, they would have to have inside information. Okay, and it's either coming from Moscow, from Putin himself, because they're opposed to him or whatever, or enemies to Putin are out there and taken out as good generals. I don't know which it is, but it's one of the two. One of the two. No, I don't think so. Kazarian member Putin? No, I don't think so. No. Oh, Felicia, you're here. It says divorce was not in Yah's plan. Correct. According to the Bible, because of the hardness of man's heart, it was allowed for adultery. Very good, Felicia. Actually, it was for fornication, right? And what is fornication? It's not just sex. Uh, Actually, the original meaning, and you might want to talk to Ronnie about this, but the original idea of fornication was strange wives, bringing those who were not of Israel into marriage and bringing them in. And of course, that was outside the marriage covenant for Israel. So that's how it morphed into the thing of no sex outside of marriage. However, and I'm going to cover this for just a minute. You may remember, Felicia, I talked about the instruction in Leviticus there, where if a man lay with a woman and he loses his seed, if his seed comes out of him, both he and the woman need to take a bath and wash their clothes. Well, it was a hygienic thing. A lot of people try to put some type of oh, it's life being wasted, and that kind of thing. It has nothing to do with it. It was really a hygienic thing, as you probably know. And it didn't make any mention of the man and woman being married in the sense of the term that we would associate that. So there were other things going on anciently um, between men and women. As you know, there was concubinage, for instance, and that was basically a marriage for a set amount of time, or at least not uh, as wifely um, rights, I guess you could say. They didn't necessarily have, unless it was in the agreement, didn't have any claim on the husband's property or his holdings or whatever. But you could make a marriage for a day. I should reverse that. You could make a concubinage contract for a day or for the rest of your lives, and it could be altered. So there's some really good examples of that, but not really understood in the Bible. The best one is probably not in the Bible actually, and I've told this story before, where Abraham goes to see his son Ishmael, and it's in I'm forgetting now exactly where it is. Uh, Pardon me that I've forgotten that, but he goes to see his son Ishmael, and Ishmael's gone when he gets there, and he sees a woman there who doesn't pay any attention to him. Here he is, Ishmael's father, and the woman's just, don't bother me, whatever. And so Abraham stuck around for a while because she said Ishmael was out in the woods, out in the hills, whatever. And Abraham waits and then says, "Well, would you tell my son Ishmael that I noticed that the center pole of the tent is very weak and he needs to replace it?" He goes away and he comes back like a year later, and there's a different woman there. And he comes up and he says, "Where's my son Ishmael?" "Oh, he's out with the flocks out in the mountains, and I don't know when he's going to be back." "Oh, okay. Well, who are you?" "Well, I'm his wife." "Oh, and who are you?" "Well, I'm his father." "You're his father? Oh, let me wash your feet. Let me prepare some meals for you. Look, are you comfortable? Do you need anything? What can I do for you?" And Abraham was there for whatever length of time, and then he says to the woman, "Tell my son Ishmael when he returns that center pole of the tent is just right. It's really strong, and it's holding up the tent, and it's a good one." And of course, it was all a metaphor for the women. The first one was weak and was going to break, and the second one was very, very strong. So you kind of see where these things are, everybody. Felicia, I was addressing that to you primarily. But yeah, divorce wasn't in the plan, but there are. It wasn't just for adultery. It was in Leviticus. Jesus, of course, said, "Well, Moses gave you divorce because of the hardness of your hearts." That's correct. But uh, there were provisions for things that were either lied about. For instance, the wife or the husband doesn't fulfill their duty of marriage, right? One of the scriptures, and I don't have it right handy right now, but you could look this up. If a woman is free, if the man refuses to do his duty of marriage, if he married another wife, for instance, be it, well, I'll just say it, married another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage of the first wife would not be diminished. Okay, so there were some rules, and if you refused the duty of marriage, it was grounds for divorce. Abandonment, as we've talked about, Felicia, was also grounds for a woman being free. But a man divorcing a wife because he just wants, he's got let's say me, for instance, and I've got say, a 50-year-old wife, and I see some nice little 25-year-old. Out of the hardness of my heart, I dump my 50-year-old wife and go after the 25-year-old. That was forbidden, and that's what the Herodians were doing. See, that was what was going on in all that situation that Jesus was addressing, and James and all those. He was addressing the marriage, I should say, the sexual practices of the Herodians, which the Maccabees did not engage in. So that's why that whole thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls isn't entirely about the Maccabees. I hope that makes sense, Felicia, and I hope I didn't go into so much detail that we lost it there, but let's see. Oh, yeah, that's true. Tsunami Sue says divorce is because of lawyers. Yeah, there's a funny little thing that says, if you have one lawyer in the town, he's the poorest man in the town. If you have two lawyers in the town, they're the richest men in the town. Yeah. Serving other gods. Yes. Fornication is serving other gods. Exactly, exactly, exactly. And bringing women, that's what happened to Solomon, right? With all his wisdom and everything, he brought women from other nations who worshiped other gods, and he was drawn into that because he wanted to do what? He wanted to please his women, not just God. So that was the problem. That's what real fornication is. That's exactly right. When they turn your heart from God, that's the real fornication that's going on. It's not sex. Sex is just one. It can be, but that's really not what the scriptures are talking about. Thank you, Felisa, for bringing that up. A lot of Christians don't like that. That's why I did that. I'm not saying it's not for everybody, and I certainly was not a good example of it. But it wasn't sinful. It was just, there's a fine line between courage and stupidity. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, let's see who. Isha, Nashim. Oh, very good, very good. Nashim is woman. Isha. Okay. So is Isha. Chad is asking about valid grounds for divorce in the Bible. I think I just covered that. I'll say it again. Abandonment, uh, refusal to do the duty of marriage. For men, it's if the woman has lied and he finds something untold about her, something bad. Like she's really not a virgin when she said she was. Now you can marry. That gets into some other things. Marrying someone who's not a virgin isn't really a problem, um, but if they say they're a virgin and they're not, that's a problem. Okay, stuff like that. Yeah, temporary marriage is in Iran because they understand that. That's another form of concubinage. So basically, valid grounds for divorce. Of course, if somebody's beating you, you don't. I mean, if you're getting beaten every day, whether, and this is touching a fine line. And I'm glad I'm not the judge of this. But if you're getting psychologically abused, that can be as bad as getting physically abused. I can't tell you that because that sometimes people will make things up or blow things out of proportion. Uh, but if you do, then you're responsible for bearing false witness, which is, of course, another commandment which you're not supposed to break. But I'm not in a position to judge that. So all I'm saying is abandonment, refusal of the duty of marriage. You can't have a child, believe it or not, for the man. If the woman can't have a child, that's reason. Um, if a man can't give you a child, that's another reason. Okay, and I mentioned abandonment and, of course, physical and emotional abuse. A woman doesn't have to stay in a place where she's being mistreated. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I hope that answered your question, Roosevelt. They already are. Liberty can. Do you think the rich churches will gather and fund the NWO? They already are. They're pushing this whole thing that's come out the last 2 years. A lot of them. The Mormon Church just did. The Mormon Church says you got to do it. So yeah, I mean, wow. I don't know what you're laughing about, Felicia. Did I say something funny or somebody else? M1 is Mahdi the AC. Well, like I said, my understand from Petco 1 and 2, which I mean, it was interesting, but and it might be somebody who has inside information. It's possible, but the real situation, as I see it, is that there has to be a tie-in with this false state of Israel that's really ruled by those who say they are Jews and are not. I'm not saying the people that are there aren't, but the rulers sure as hell aren't. Okay, they're Babylon. They're talked about in Revelation. Um, uh, I believe Felicia and Ronnie Mann. Am I saying that right? Felicia, I think so. And Beauty, the Beast System Revealed have talked about that, and I have too for a little bit. A woman who has Jesus is never alone. That's not what Jesus wants. Okay? The man-woman relationship is not ethereal. It's not spiritualized. It can be in the it can be in, in the afterlife in the spirit world, and I argue about that plenty of time. But I'm not saying that's not okay, but it's not a replacement. Paul was wrong about that, and he said it for a very specific reason. When he said, "If you do not have a husband, don't look for one." You want to please God. If you're a man and you don't have a wife, don't look for one. That's contrary to the commandment. And that's why I also say that James, the brother of Jesus, and Jesus himself were married. They were married men. But because they didn't bring their women into the camp of the military, which is basically what Qumran was, it wasn't a place for women or children. They wouldn't let them in because it's a military camp. And they didn't want the possibility of menstruation, blood to contaminate the camp. That was a Levitical thing, and they didn't want dogs in there because dogs would would bring in bones with flesh still attached to them. So they didn't want dogs in the camp either. And a lot of people forget about that. My point is that now, if you've been married and you've lost your spouse, I can understand not wanting to remarry. Especially if the love is strong. But you're under no obligation to remain without a companion. No obligation at all. If the male sperm and female egg are functioning before they meet, they are alive. Well, just like any other cell in your body. I mean, if you take your skin and you cut it off, right, and you toss it away, have you committed a sin? No, of course not. All right, so even the blood, okay? Again, a lot of people get wound up around this. This is Vox Populi, the voice of the people. No different than any other cell. Now, the only difference is that, of course, they have half the chromosomes, each one. But it's still just like a cell normally would be. Okay, so that's not an issue. Uh, there's an old saying, hopefully, we're all an adult audience here. If you have any kids in the room, you might want to ask them to leave for a minute because of what I'm going to say. And I've said it before. There's been a big issue about concupiscence, lust. And yet people don't really know. And I did a whole lesson on what lust is and that it's not a sin. It just means desire. But desire can be envy, or jealousy, which then can be a problem. If a man looketh upon a woman to desire her, and what Jesus is talking about is a married woman, so you're talking about trying to interfere with another man's relationship, yeah, that's adultery. You're thinking about adultery in your mind. Absolutely. But looking at a pretty woman, like you look at a sunset or you look at a mountain, no, that's not sinful. So what the story is you've probably heard this, and I hope the kids are out of the room. It is better to spill thy seed upon, or it is better to put thy seed in the belly of a whore than to spill it upon the ground. That's a very common thing because of a misunderstanding of the story of Judah and Tamar. Let me tell you the real deal about that, okay? That's not an issue. Leviticus was very plain. If a man loses his seed in the middle of the night, however it happens, he's just supposed to go wash himself in his clothes and he's unclean until even. Not because it was nasty and evil, but because it's a hygienic thing. You don't want to go in, you cut yourself, for instance, and you go in to do work around the tabernacle or whatever, you're bleeding all over the place. That ain't good. Sorry about all the texts coming in. I didn't turn those off. But what happened was Judah had a son, and he married this woman Tamar. Well, then the son died without having children. So, as I explained to you earlier, the next brother in line will marry that woman and have at least the first child by her will be the dead husband's child. So this actually went through a couple of sons, but it ended up in Onan, which is where the word onanism comes in, where people think this is masturbation. It wasn't, but What happened was is that Onan went into Tamar as he was supposed to, as Judah directed and as God directed, and he wouldn't complete the copulation. He pulled out for the express purpose of not having a child for his brother. In other words, he was basically killing his brother's line, which is murder. Boom! So Onan, God killed him. It wasn't because he masturbated. It wasn't because he spilled the seed on the ground. It was because his intent of not bringing up seed to his dead brother. That was the issue. Am I right, Felicia? Are you listening still? Maybe Felicia will come. Well, the reason why I asked Felicia about that is because she's very well versed in the Old Testament, and Ronnie Mann and heard talk about these things all the time. So maybe she had to go because I've been going on longer than I wanted to. But marriage is an interesting thing. This was another thing about the statement of Val's Creation Studio asks if a man and a woman become one, are they considered married in God's eyes? The basic answer is yes, but again, it can be for time. Sex outside of marriage is fornication. Mary loves God says. No, not necessarily. No, no, it's not forbidden. It's not even fornication. The Old Testament fornication, even in the first century, had to do with outside tribes, nations. Okay, um, and it gets a little more involved than that. But and this goes with what Val's Creation Studio is saying here too. State marriage didn't become a thing until 1890, and it was actually brought about because of miscegenation. They wanted to license interracial marriage, and then they found to control it, and then they found out that it was a lucrative way to control people. So then licensed marriage started. God never demanded that. When Abraham had his servant go and get a wife, Rebecca, for Isaac, Rebecca just merely agreed. There was no ceremony, nothing. She comes back, and Isaac was staying in his mother's tent. And when he saw Rebecca, he fell in love with her and he took her into his mother's tent and consummated the marriage. What is the marriage? It's the connection of the male and female. It's not some thing. Now, in the old times, it was family, uh, celebrating it, so everybody knew they were together. But no, sex outside of marriage is that's kind of an oxymoron. Sex is a marriage. It's whether or not it's adulterated or not. That's the issue. You can't adulterate a woman. You adulterate a contract, and the contract is between a man and a woman. If another party, another man comes in there and does something, then he's adulterated that marriage contract. Okay, but Leviticus has already said, and Jesus never said anything about this either. He talked to the woman at the well. Yeah. Oh, it's true that you've had, a husband. You've had 7 husbands, but she violated the contract. That's why he brought it up. Because in Leviticus, again, as I just said, if a man and a woman lie together and the man's seed comes out of him, the man and the woman both shall. So you can get married for an agreed amount of time or forever. It's called concubinage or marriage. So, but yeah, God does not look unfavorably on those as long as there's an understanding of the contractual arrangement, and it doesn't have to be, for life. Preferably, yes, but there's nothing in there that says it has to be for life. Thank you, Felicia, for telling me I was right about all that information there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 3 wives, man. Yeah, well, let me tell you where the name of this book came from. When I finished writing it, I didn't know what to title it, and I had a friend that said, "Well, what about what Elmer Fudd said?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? Um, the way he talks, I wed 3 wives, I wed 3 wives." Anyway, that's where it came from. I used to smoke a lot. The doctor told me smokeless tobacco is healthier, has no more health risks than a cup of coffee. I don't know about that because I've never done. I've heard people get lip and gum cancer from it, but there's a lot of propaganda out there, so I don't know. Yeah, no, that's right. Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. True. That's true. I'm not denying that. Yeah. The best relationship is the one-on-one, because when we were created male and female together. Okay. Uh, but there's nothing that's the actual disagreement about um, about what you're saying there actually didn't become an issue until the first century, and it's because of what the Herodians were doing, where they were marrying a woman, divorcing her, marrying another one, divorcing her. That was the problem, and that's the type of polygamy that was looked down upon by the early apostles, because that's um, doing divorce for the hardness of your hearts. Okay. David Knight would really disagree with me, for instance, on that. He would say exactly what you're kind of saying there, and I'm not disagreeing with Genesis 2:24. I'm not disagreeing with that, but there's a lot more to what that means, and I've talked about it before. I don't want to waste a lot of time here. Um, Look at Hosea. Look at the prophet Hosea. He was married and he was told to go marry a prostitute as a second wife, and he fell in love with her, and she kept cheating on him. And God said, "That's why I wanted you to marry her." God commanded Hosea to take that woman, and He did it so that Hosea would understand how God felt about Israel not staying true to Him. It wasn't the marriage that was the problem; it was the conduct of the wife that was the problem. Well, that's not entirely true, Moradora. We are no longer under the law but grace. See, that's another problem. I'm not going to argue doctrine tonight. But that's another problem. Jesus said, "Not one word, not one jot or tittle shall pass until all is fulfilled." Well, He didn't fulfill it all, because then He said, "Greater things will you do than I have done, because I go to the Father." No, it's not all filled yet. We're still down. We're still working on it. We're still going down the timeline. But I'm not going to get into that tonight. Those Christian statements, and I'll just tell you, ketubah. Yeah, the ketubah is the marriage ceremony. That's right. Yeah, ketubah. Yeah, very good, Lynn BB. That's exactly right. And in the word there, it tells you what it is when you look it up. Ketubah. It was an innovation later, but yeah. It's a contract. That's all it is. It's a contract. Government gets its paws on your marriage when you bring them in it. Exactly right, Felicia. Now, that's right. Val's Creation Studio. Very true. Exactly. Vows Creation Studios, I'm assuming you're a woman. You say, if they say the vows, that is the contract. That's exactly right. And it might be, if you make a vow not to ever give yourself to another person, then you've bound to that contract. And if you violate it, you've committed adultery. You've adulterated the contract. However, if that wasn't the agreement, for instance, in my situation, I'm not making excuses, I'm just telling you, the women understood what was going on. The vow was that they accepted those women into the family. That was the vow. I didn't break anything. Okay? What does that mean? Um, Jabi Miside. In Christ there is neither Jew nor Gentile, nor male nor female, nor slave nor bond, or nor slave, bond nor free. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean there are no men and women. It doesn't mean there aren't Jews and Gentiles. It means they're all treated the same way according to the law and the truth. You don't in a situation, you don't favor the Jew over the Gentile. You don't favor the male over the female. And there have been disagreements in the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Jude and the Gospel of Thomas, about when Jesus said, they talked about him kissing Mary Magdalene on her mouth often. And I talked about this before, and the apostles are upset, and they say, "Why do you love her more than us?" And he goes, "Are you kidding? Why do I love her more than you? Are you crazy?" Basically is what he's saying. And they say, "Well, she's not male. She's not worthy of the life," because they're going back to this thing that the male is the end result. And he says, "I will make her male. I will bring her in and make her male." He meant he was marrying her. Now, the Kabbalists took that a little further because the Talmudic Kabbalists have a problem with sex. They don't like men and women. They'll talk about the male and female attributes and traits, but it's like we're seeing today, the destruction of the sexes. It's okay, to push, the two of the same kind together. I'm talking in riddles here, right? Follow me. But I forgot what I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, so it's not quite what is meant. Oh, okay, John, okay, okay, good. To become one, yeah. What does that mean? Sustainable stewards to become one. Jesus explained what that's like, right? Father, I pray that these that you have given me will be one with us as you and I are one. They're all still individuals. They become one together. They share the same attributes. They're all righteous or they're all wicked. In this case, with Jesus, all are righteous, right? Nuclear family. Yeah. Well, the nuclear family for Abraham was pretty big. He had Sarah, right? He had Hagar. He had Keturah. And the scriptures say he had many tents. Well, a tent is a euphemism for a wife because the wives owned the tents. Kind of interesting stuff. All right. Mother, father, and children. Look. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. So what do you do with Abraham? What do you do with Jacob or Israel? What do you do with Gideon? What do you do with Solomon? And they'll say, well, he was a bad guy. Well, he turned bad because he married women outside Israel. And then he started worshiping their gods. That was the fornication that he committed. Um, as a matter of fact, I was mentioning in one video quite some time ago about in Revelation where it says, talk about the 144,000. These are they who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Well, that has the meaning of not that the men were virgins, because that's a female thing. Nowhere is it talk. There's another scripture in I think it's in Galatians where it talks about a man being a virgin, but that's an incorrect uh, translation because nowhere is a man ever considered a virgin in the scriptures. So that reference in Revelation is talking about the women were virgins, meaning that they were not from strange nations, the nations of those worshiping false gods, right? That's what it meant, and that they didn't belong to anyone else. That's all it means. That they hadn't had a firstborn until they were with the husband that they're with. So the 144,000, whenever you number Israel, it's only the men you number. You don't count the women and you don't count the children. It's only the men. Right, Felicia? Felicia can back me up on that. So when it says 144,000, that's just the men. And then they weren't defiled with women, meaning they didn't marry strange women of foreign nations that would turn their hearts from God, commit fornication to God. And they were women who had, until they married their husband, had not had a firstborn child. That's all it means. That's all it means. And it's all been. Whoa, I don't know. Marcy Jack, can you explain if the angels bound under the earth are released? Not yet. I don't know. Apparently they are with the way crazy things are going on, right? God said that, I mean, it looks like it to me, but, that would be my feeling on the subject that we're really getting pounded by these things now. Most of them are incarnated. Walter, when I go camping, I need to be looking for tents. Yeah, King Solomon and King David had many concubines. That's true. And so did the prophets. The prophets had concubines and wives. For instance, Abraham. Abraham's wife was Sarah, But it says he had many wives, and well, then it names Hagar as a concubine, right? And it names several others, Keturah. But he had many wives and concubines, many tents. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying to go out and do that. Oh, no, 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 no. You know, um, uh, well, anyway, I was going to show you a picture of Carol, but that's all right. If I had Carol and that's all I had, I'd be more than happy. I'm not going to get into that. Rachel is single. I'm not sure who you're talking about. If you mean Rachel, the wife of Jacob, I don't know how you'd come up with that, so you must be talking about somebody else. Yeah, that's true, Vic Morrow. They had an agreement to all agree where we go one, we go all. Doesn't that sound familiar? Chris Curtis says, "Thank you, Roy, for your interest in investigating the Torah, the Dead Sea Scrolls, biblical, apocryphal, and Gnostic Gospels, and deciphering, gathering, and pinpointing the truth in the Hebrew Greek." I appreciate that. I'm not the final arbiter of the truth in these things. I'm still investigating just like all you are. But normally, the things I talk about that I've already resolved to my satisfaction, that's how I address it to you. And a lot of things I can't. You know, this was certainly one, right? Obvious, because I understand why those letters are used and why the commandment is you don't kill the innocent, you don't kill the righteous. Okay, other than the other words that are used for slaying and killing, right? It's things like that. So I can tell you those things, and we're right on the money with that. On the marriage thing, yeah, I'm right on the money on that too. Marriage and concubinage, I'm right on the money on that. Okay, does that mean that you're required to do it that way? No. As far as showing you, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the apocryphal and Gnostic Gospels, there's a lot of well, I think you probably understand, Chris, that a lot of the New Testament is pseudepigrapha as well. They weren't the authors aren't the people who have their names in there. We're not even sure about all the Pauline epistles, and there are reasons for that, which I won't go into tonight. Um, but at any rate, overall, the Bible teaches principle, and the principles are what you've heard me say it how many times? The twin pillars, and I'm not talking about Masonic pillars. I'm talking about the pillars of love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Upon these two stand all the law and the prophets. Piety and righteousness. A lot is forgiven when you're doing those. That makes up for a lot. There you go. Somebody else said the greatest commandment. Love. Well, actually, serenity. The actual verbiage goes like this: what is the great commandment? What is the greatest commandment? Jesus asked, and he says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it. In other words, basically the same. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Why? Well, Jesus explained that. As you have done unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done unto me. So those two are actually the same thing. Right? Uh, Randy Moon, I wouldn't worry about that. See, she fornicated against you. Okay? Don't worry about that. It's not your fault. That's not your fault. Okay? No, I understand Liza Jean, and we won't get into that tonight. Um, there are some problems in the Old Testament, but the scriptures as a whole are there to teach principle, not necessarily. Paul was right in some regards. Okay, um, and you'd have to understand the history of the fight between Paul and James. And I've talked about it before. You can go get Eisenman's books, and he's done a very good job. And of course, my Eisenman series explains it, my religion series. Um, If 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 the Old Testament laws are gone, if they're archaic laws, then we don't need to pay attention to the Ten Commandments, do we? That's Old Testament. Jesus didn't make any exceptions. He said quite the opposite. Now, when it comes down to sacrifices and the 613 commandments, on top of the 10, we probably have a discussion on that, but probably not here. Probably not here. I understand where you're coming from, um, but James made it very clear that Jesus that he talked about grace, but it was based upon obedience to the law and obedience to especially those two pillars. Now, I'm getting just so Jessup, dude. Jessup, you must be Mormon. That's a Mormon surname. Um, Asked Roy, do you think that the angel that visited Joseph Smith is one and the same that visited Muhammad to spread false or misleading doctrine? Muhammad and that entire thing was a Talmudic invention. I can't really get into any more detail than that. Not here. It's historically it's a little difficult to get into, but yeah, Mormonism, that's a whole nother thing. Um, I'm not Mormon, not any longer. I haven't been for 40, 40 years this year. Yeah, 40 years this year. Uh, and I was only Mormon for 10 years prior to that. I was baptized in the church when I was 17, was out when I was 27, maybe 26. But Joseph Smith is an interesting story. Uh, you know, the first vision, there are a lot of questions about that. Frankly, I don't think it ever happened, and Mormons get upset when I say that. Uh, it just had too many transitions, too many different storylines. It was told several different ways. Now that's explainable in some regards to what you think is important now, and then you realize what's important later. So that may add into it. I'm not here to pass judgment on Joseph Smith. Uh, the polygamy that I was familiar with did not come from him. It wasn't Mormon polygamy that was the deal. It was what the Bible plainly stated about it. Um, but I don't think I'll go any further than that tonight. As far as being the same angel that deceived Muhammad, no, no, I don't think so. Uh, the Talmudic Jews, especially the Talmudic Kabbalistic Jews, will maintain when you talk about Joseph Smith and the angel Moroni and all that it was Moloch, that they're Moloch worshippers, and that it was Moloch that came to Joseph Smith. Nah, nah. They say that, but the Mormon Moroni and the Mormon God doesn't match up with Moloch. No, no, it doesn't. I think Joseph Smith was trying to get somewhere, and no different than say Franklin Graham and Mormons will just well, Joseph Smith's been forgotten by Mormons in large part now, but um, I look at Joseph Smith more like Franklin Graham or Pat Buchanan, maybe I don't know, people like that. Uh, he was onto some things. He had studied Egyptian, he had studied Hebrew, he had rabbi tutors. So he was trying to get back to the whole of the law, I think is the way to put it. And it just got kind of messed up along the way, is the way I view it. For instance, I don't believe that the Book of Mormon is a history of the Nephites and the Lamanites. No, I think what it really is, it's a prophecy about the breakdown of America because the real The real story in the Book of Mormon are the secret combinations that destroy governments and kingdoms. That's the real story in the Book of Mormon. And the Mormons don't understand that because they've been taught that the only secret combinations are tobacco companies and alcohol companies. All right. So, all right. What seal is opening now? Blah. Okay. I think we're getting too deep into this. We've gone an hour and a half already. There is good reason to believe that the beauty or the beast system revealed, where he talks about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, he's probably right. I firmly believe that the first white horse with the man on it with the crown and the bow was the first seal, and we saw that happen almost to the T with Trump. Then the second, of course, is war, and it's leading up to which we're seeing now. You know, but these things repeat. As I've often said, Hebrew thought is not linear. Uh, when the prophets write things down, they're not seeing things in a linear fashion. So even the thing like, well, the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years and the 7 years and the 70 years and all that, we apply our Western idea of linear time and linear thought to those prophecies. That's not how the Middle Easterners think. They think in circles. For instance, as I've pointed out before, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, right? It's it's it repeats. So uh, these things are recurring, and they recur in different eons, different epochs, different ages. And this age is to end shortly, from, if we understand the scriptures correctly. But is it going to be 4 years, 100 years? I'm not sure. I think we're well into it, and the four horsemen of the apocalypse I think are well underway at this point. Yeah, we're in the second one right now, and then the third is plague, disease, etc. The pale horse is really green, and black is, or maybe I got that reversed, but black is plague, famine, etc., etc. And don't forget, the scriptures say that there won't so much be a famine in the land of food, but a famine in the hearing of the word of the Lord. Right? That's what's really. I'm going back here to check some things. Okay. All right. Hour and a half. You know, the mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. Zelensky doesn't know. Zelensky could be an antichrist, but he's not the antichrist. He doesn't qualify. Doesn't qualify. He's just a mean-hearted actor, is all he is. Black horses, yeah. Economy, the price of barley and wheat, yeah. Famine, yeah. All that, yeah. Zelensky is Jewish, yeah, I know. Yeah, I believe that Donald Trump thinks he's Apollyon incarnated. I do believe that. Everything around him kind of points to that. All righty, I got to let you go. I've kept you long enough. So, what have we talked about tonight? We've talked about the commandment of thou shalt not kill is actually talking about the innocent, the righteous, those who bow down and respect. For instance, you're in a fight and a guy kneels down and surrenders. He's now bowed down himself to you. And even in the wars that the Israelites fought, they had to give the enemy an avenue of escape, at least one. And if they took that avenue of escape, they were considered to be bowing down and were allowed to live. Okay? We talked about that. We talked about the difference in all the different killing words, that this is the only one that does talk about the innocent, about the bowed down, about the righteous, about the humble, and the devoted. Then we talked about the marriage situation a little bit, and we talked a little bit about Putin and this whole thing going on in in Europe there, and that I'm not real certain about. The Russians could totally wipe out Ukraine today. So they could be holding back because they don't want to destroy the entire country, or it could be a gain to prolong it. Uh, Putin could be pretending to be Christian when he's not. I mean, there are so many factors in here. I can't read his mind. All I know militarily at this point is they've actually won the war, but they're prolonging it. And the only reason I can see for prolonging it, there are only two. One is to try for negotiation, right? That's I understand that to some extent. And the other is that those are his people. Really, they're his people, and he didn't really want to go this far. He really did want to go after the you know the guys that have that symbol, and to stop the killing in the eastern provinces there in the Donbass region by the Ukrainians on the other side. We talked about that, and then we talked a little bit about um, the situation with the ongoing attack on the peoples of the world by their own governments. They're evil. The governments are all evil. They're all controlled by evil people. And what I would like to have happen to them would be getting myself in trouble if I said it on here. But you all know what I'm talking about. Have you changed your mind on the DJT being the AC? He's at least NAC, but he is the only one on the world stage right now that punches almost all the tickets. So I'm still betting that he's going to come back and be the big savior, not Putin, not anybody else. He's the one that has all the ticket punches. Nobody else does. He's deceived the elect, almost the very elect. Look at who follows him. I've talked about that so many times. I get so frustrated with the people that hold him up, considering the fact that he's the father of what? Somebody tell me. He's the father of what? The thing that's killing and maiming people right now. Yeah. Roosevelt, you always have a funny thing to say. Zelensky is the man in high heels, not the pale horse, not the white horse, not the red. That was good. Do you think they will use nukes? I don't think they want to. I think it is possible that we could go tactical nuclear. I think that's possible. But a lot of this is just fear to get the people confused and afraid. Remember, all of this is a war against you, not even against really the Ukrainians and the Russians or NATO and the Russians or whatever. The real war is against you, Marcia Jack. That's what it's all really pointed to is you, the people, especially the people that want to live in peace and love God. That's who they're really after. Okay, so you're the actual target. Russia is moving slow and methodical, yes, and I don't object to that for the reasons I've said. But now, with the generals being killed and with the calls for war that the hesitation by Putin has caused, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It depends on who really. How did they find those generals to kill them? They'd have to have inside intelligence information to do that. It's just not a random shell hitting a tank on a battlefield. That's not how it works. Okay. Wow, I've really gone way overboard here now, but I think we've done a pretty good job tonight. Chat, thank you. I could have said that, Felicia. Just, sometimes I get so many things going on. Yeah, OWS, right? I get so many things going through my head with stuff that I can't possibly tell you all of it. You know what I mean? Um, okay. I think I've done that already. Emergency exit show on Trump and the AC theories. I think I've covered that a lot, but we'll see. Maybe I could do another one to kind of summarize it all. Maybe that would not be a bad idea. Okay. Hey, Roosevelt, I saw that picture of Zelensky dancing. I wanted to puke. That's a leader of of a country, especially that one. Oh my gosh, people got to wake up. Okay, so that's it. I told you what I was going to tell you. I told you, and then I told you what we talked about. Did a little review here. So I'm going to go ahead and go. Tomorrow, probably nothing unless something happens during the day. But I got to get out very, very early Wednesday morning, so I probably won't do anything tomorrow night. And I'll be pretty much busy all day Wednesday, maybe Thursday and Friday. But we'll see. Maybe I'll have time for if something really needs to be covered real shortly. I can do that. Okay. All right. Yeah, Wag the Dog, De Niro and Hoffman. Yeah, that's true. Okay, everybody, remember Ozarks would be a great place of refuge. The only problem is that the government has a lot of dumbs in there. I think you probably know about that. Which generals? There were 5 Russian generals that were killed. Have been killed in 4 weeks. That's unheard of. What was that? Yeah, Jessup, dude. Yeah, maybe one of these days I might call everybody in the Intermountain area if you want. I don't know how many there are to have a little meeting somewhere maybe, and a lot of this can be brought up. I don't have any disrespect for the pioneers, the early Mormon pioneers, and all. That's not that. There are other problems that I'm concerned with, and it's certainly not the people themselves. Although I think they get talked into stuff sometimes that's a little against their welfare. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground, situational awareness on high. Uh, Prep, pray, stay out of the way. As I was saying, you don't want to be in a situation where you might be called upon to do something like this. Okay? You need to avoid that as best you can. All right? Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you again later out here.